I went ahead and cleaned up my work down in the vertical area, including replacing those resistors that I had clipped and tested earlier. And then, kind of on a hunch, I did a little work on the audio circuitry. There were two paper caps up around the volume control, and I replaced them with these white guys here. And also over here, it's a 4 microfarad cap actually mounted on the top side of the chassis that's used in the ratio detector. Right here on the schematic. So I clipped the original out and tacked in a replacement right here. I'm curious to see if between those two areas that there's going to be any improvement in the sound situation. So time for another power up. You'll notice I also put the original 6SQ7 back in, even though tested weak. Again, on the assumption that problems really aren't too based. It's the passive components causing trouble. Well, unfortunately, still have no sound whatsoever. The one thing I'm kind of afraid of, or not afraid of, but we have to deal with is there are actually mica caps inside these. This is the first sound IF, and this is the ratio detector transformer, and I have worked on these chassis before, and I know that there are exposed mica wafer type caps in here of the type that can go bad in All-American 5 radios. So I may need to pack. Actually, even if I get this set working, I think I should pop these open. There's another sets I've worked on with similar designs. Even if the sound was working, it worked a lot better. I replaced those caps. What can happen is the silver plating on the pieces of mica can start migrating, forming little tendrils, sort of like tin can do, and cause some leakage between the two sides of the cap, or two plated areas. Yeah, nothing but a hum. Just curious is that it clearly does respond when I change the channel. We get some noise going through. But it's just not picking up the sound. Another possibility is the sound IF alignment could be way off. See, there's adjustments up here, and there are also a couple down below. But that's the very last thing I would think about doing, is mucking around with those. So curious that Channel 6 is just completely gone, both audio and video. It makes me wonder if they've finally stopped broadcasting. I know that day will come. Not so fast. In the past when I've worked on sets, I've gotten enough gain that I could pick up Channel 6 without much of an antenna at all. Even just having this little balun attached here would let some signal leak through. But check this out. I got a long piece of wire, about 20 feet long. If I clip it onto one of the antenna terminals, I'm actually picking something up. And hey, there's Channel 6 back. And some sound. Which goes back to my earlier theory that actually the sound circuitry is working. but the gain is very, very reduced. So that it takes a station like this, which is really an FM radio station with a very strong sound carrier, to jam through enough that we can hear something. So with the volume all the way up, it's pretty lame. Normally on a well-working TV, when you tune to channel 6, it'd be blasting. Here's that burn the next day. And I was going to leave this out of the video, and I got to thinking it could serve as a good cautionary tale. I've been working on this stuff for a while, and at times I make it a little sloppy. Well, you can pay the price, so always be careful when you work on these vintage sets. Treat them with some respect. Also wanted to talk a little bit about troubleshooting these vintage electronics. So, as I've said a few times, I got some experience doing this, so I kind of have some idea where the problems might lie. But if you're a complete novice, take your time and go through it more methodically. Also, I suggest you work on a cleaner workbench. I've got several projects going on, and things are a little messy right now. I do apologize. So, if you didn't know what to look for, what I recommend, one thing you do is print yourself out the voltage and resistance chart. I got this from the Sam's. You'll find this in most service info. Also handy to have this, which is the tube chart. Each tube is assigned a designator, V1, V2, V3, typically. And you'll see those in this chart. So what this is it lists every tube in the TV, and for every pin they show the voltage you should expect on it when it's operating normally. And likewise, this is the resistance. Typically it's between the chassis, which is ground, and the pin. But not always. See, there's some notes on here. You need to be careful. And these say, these taking an FM position, that's telling you what setting to put it in. Doesn't apply to this. That's for the combo set where there's an AM and FM and phono mode. But also notice there are some indicators in here. Tell you it's measured from pin 8 of V28 or pin 8 of V29. What that means is take the negative of your voltmeter or ohm meter, and instead of attaching it to the chassis, attach it where they say to attach it. And then go through and check your resistance. I would do the resistance first and then do the voltage. What this will help you do is pinpoint a problem. So if the resistance is off, most likely the bias resistor connected to that pin is drifted out of tolerance. If those check okay, power it up, check the voltages, and if those are off, could be a problem with a leaky cap or tube. So, still have no sound. I shouldn't say no sound, we have very weak sound. So, sound circuit right here. I think it makes sense at this point to do a resistance check on these tubes, and then a voltage check. Likewise, down here. So, preamp tube, output tube, and I believe that is the output transformer. Check that stuff. There are a few caps and resistors underneath the chassis going to these tubes. Well, here is the audio circuit. So, this white wire here is where it's picked off right after the first video IF tube after the tuner. And then we go through 2 stages of audio IF, and then dual diode ratio detector down here. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot to it. No paper caps, just a few ceramic, and they're used for RF bypass. Can't imagine they're bad. Ceramic caps very rarely go bad. And I did check the resistance using that resistance chart and the voltage chart, and they're both within spec. So, no smoking guns here. I also went and recapped the audio amp and output circuit. 4 paper caps down there. It sounds slightly louder when I tune in channel 6, but nowhere near as loud as it should be, and nothing when I use the converter box. So, what I'm thinking is the problem are those mica caps inside the IF cans, or the alignment is off. Well, as I said earlier, I'm not going to do an alignment until I finish troubleshooting the rest of the set and replacing out of spec components. So I'm going to save the sound for last and move on with other stuff. So I pulled this cover off, which exposes the video IF, and went through, did a resistance check on that, and found one bad one. It's kind of fried looking down in here. It should be 100 ohms. It measures about 250 ohms. The rest are within spec, so I'll leave them alone. And also we noticed that there was a lot of tearing in the horizontal. So after I replace that resistor, I am going to move on to the sync and horizontal circuitry, which is this stuff in here. And see if we get that horizontal more stable. I'm also hoping when I replace that resistor that will get more gain. And that's a cathode resistor on the second video IF tube, so fixing that up should boost the gain a little bit. Maybe we'll get a little bit sharper picture. Well, I replaced that resistor and a few caps in the horizontal discriminator circuit, and I got kind of an odd effect going on now where it fades in and out of lock, and the video quality goes from being really sharp, and then it kind of fades out, and then I lose vertical lock, and it comes back in. When it is locked, though, the picture is really, really sharp. So what I think is going on is that we've got some leakage current, probably through one of the paper caps that's left in there, and something has a very long RC time constant. As the charge builds up, it's lowering the gain, possibly in the AGC circuit. So I imagine like a really slow undulating waveform that's creeping through the circuit and fading the gain in and out, or affecting the sync circuitry at any rate. And the horizontal circuit still has the same issue. If I crank up the contrast, it gets very twisted. Look at these vertical lines here, they're really bad. Even if I put the contrast all the way down. I'm going to shift my attention back to the sound now. In particular, I want to pop open these two IF cans. This type is held on by this pronged fork here that goes down to the chassis, so I squeezed it from below with some long nose pliers and popped it up. That's not quite enough though, because it's also held on by this collar here, so I need to squeeze that in a little bit and then it'll lift right off. This guy is held on by a couple hex nuts down below, and then again a spring collar on top. Let's see what secrets lie within. Yep, just as I suspected. Two 30 picofarad caps. Very conveniently, they labeled them. I think it's also labeled on the schematic. And they are totally exposed to the elements. And that's what causes the problem. What I'm going to try to do is on just one of these, I'm going to carefully remove a wire and test it. I'm going to replace them regardless, but it'd be nice to know if that's the problem beforehand. Now I can't just test it in circuit because each one of these has a coil of wire in parallel with it, so it's going to look like a dead short. Okay, I've got my capacitance bridge hooked up, and I'm not measuring any leakage. However, when I try to check the capacitance, it's a little weird. So I do get an eye open, but it's not very sharp, it's not very distinctive. And it's not the right value. It's coming in at a little over 100 picofarad, and it should be 30. Now part of that could be there is some stray capacitance in the wires. my test leads. See, as I move it around, changing the capacitance a little bit. But there's not that much capacitance, and it's not a distinct eye open. So I'm going to pull out a 30 picofarad mica cap, a new one, and show you what it should test like. You know, it just occurred to me that I didn't really do a good test because there's actually a connection below the chassis to the other side of that lug, so I got to pull that out too, which could very well account for the odd reading. But regardless, here's what a good cap should test like. A big, solid, high wedge opening. And this is measuring about 40 picofarad. That makes more sense. I could accept maybe 10 picofarad of straight capacitance in my test leads, and then 30 in the cap itself. I made sure to completely disconnect the IF transformer down below, and I also disconnected the cap on this side. And same deal. Capacitance is higher than it should be, and it's very indistinct eye open. But it doesn't show leakage. It's sure not behaving like a good cap should. So let's see about the other side now. Both sides should be 30 picofarad. Okay, no leakage on this side either. How about the capacitance? Well, this one has a really solid eye open, but look at the value. It's about 110 picofarad. 30 picofarad would be way down over here. So, yeah, I think for sure both those caps need to be replaced, and then I will have to realign it because it's going to throw things off. I mean, assuming that these were at one point both exactly 30 picofarads and this thing was aligned, I'll put new caps in that nominally are 30 picofarad, but plus or minus 5% tolerance, and that's enough to throw things off. Plus, who's to say these were exactly 30 picofarad when it was made? I imagine the tolerance on these type of caps wasn't all that great. So that's why you see people warning in the forums about tinkering with this stuff. You start cracking open these cans and tinkering around, replacing parts in it, you're going to have to realign it, and you're going to need some good test equipment like this stuff over here. These need to be peaked to exactly 21.25 megahertz, and it's critical in a set like this with a split carrier right after this tuner, separate IF for video and for sound. And when the sound's misaligned, you tune it to a good picture, you got lousy sound, or vice versa. Later, they combined the IF so the sound and video would go in lockstep through all the IF, and the sound would be picked off right at the video amp. Alright, I've got the two 30 picofarad caps replaced. Pretty easy to get these off. You can heat up the pins and they slide off. And I got two new caps installed, and now the last one. I just pulled the shield off, and this one's a little bit different. It's sort of a curved cap, and it's mounted up here. Same deal, just heat up the pin, and you can kind of tease them off. So here's one side, and look at the other. I'll try testing this one after I've removed it. Well, no leakage on this cap either, but the value is off. It's closer to 50 picofarad than 35. Now I don't have a 35 to replace it with, that's kind of an oddball value, but I do have a 33 plus minus 5%, which I think will be close enough. Again, I know I'll eventually have to do an alignment, and this should be close enough that with the adjustable slug in here I can get it to lock in. Once I pop this guy in, though, I'm going to try powering it up and see if we can get any sound at all. And if we do, I'm going to try peaking this a little bit by ear. So the bottom of this coil, the top of this coil, and I think the bottom of this one, you all peak to 21.25. And then the final one is for the ratio detector. I'll talk more about that when I get to the alignment. Alright, I'm back to looking at that weak over-the-air channel 6. And when I tune it in for a good picture, got no sound, but if I go off, good sound, it's a lot louder than it was before. So I got the situation I was talking about where the sound and the video are not in sync, but the sound is definitely coming in louder now. So I tried doing it by ear, but I tell you from experience, my chances of success are pretty darn slim, because you've got 4 coils to tweak, and you really can't do them one at a time. And what you can maybe do, if you're lucky, is get to where you can hear it, move this a little bit so we can still hear it a bit, tweak these so it gets louder, and then do it again, and do it again in steps to get closer and closer to where you want it to be. Or just use some test equipment and get it done with. I just finished recapping the sync circuitry. So it gets picked off up here from the video detector output, and it goes into the sync separator. And then down here, there's the horizontal sync discriminator and the vertical integrator down in here. 2 caps left in the vertical integrator I need to replace. I'll get to those in a bit, but I want to try powering it up first. I doubt those are going to be a problem. That's a filter that doesn't see a whole lot of voltage or very strong signals on it. So even if the caps are leaky, I think it'll be alright. What I am curious about is see what effect this would have. This cap was down in here and it was mashed underneath a mica cap. It looks pretty miserable. So I expect that is going to help, as will this 0.2 microfarad. That was the pickoff that feeds the whole sync circuitry. So since both horizontal and vertical sync are pretty lousy, I'm thinking that the point at where that signal is picked off and fed into the rest of the circuitry is going to be pretty critical. So let's see if that helped. Okay, here we go. You ready, pilot? Yeah, he's ready. That's actually a good sign. I can't get horizontal lock now, or not very easily. It's before I had adjusted it to compensate probably what was out of tolerance caps. So now I actually need to tweak it back. So there's an adjustable coil in the back of the set. Right down there. So tweak that a little bit. And I'll get that right back in sync. There we go. Yep, seems rock solid now. Just focus and brightness. Now, cool. I put the contrast all the way up and there's no tearing whatsoever. Sync is way, way better now. Alright, no more messing around. Time for an alignment. Now this is specific to the Admiral 20A1 chassis, so I'm not really going to go into detail. Get a copy of the service info for your vintage TV and follow the directions. This chassis is pretty straightforward for the audio. You need an accurate RF generator that can do 21.25 megahertz. That is the sound IF frequency. RF generator output actually injects at the tube shield over the local oscillator mixer tube. You pull it up off of its base so it's floating. I wrap some electrical tape around there to keep it insulated, and RF generator goes to that. Ground goes to the chassis, and this actually couples capacitively the RF into this, which then goes throughout the rest of the set. VTVM hooks up after the ratio detector, and you peak the 3 sound IF coils. So let's start up here. Yeah, that one was way off. And as you peak each of these, you should lower your RF generator amplitude so you're not overloading the circuits. So let's go to minus 20 dBm. Now I'm glossing over a few details, like you should knock out the AGC bus and set the TV to channel 13 and so on. Again, consult your specific service info for your set. That one was also off. Do the bottom here. That was way off. Good. I was hoping everything was off, and that's why the sound is so crummy. So what I'm doing is I'm feeling down around here for the bottom of the transformer. There's a little threaded shaft with a slotted end. I got an alignment tool. It's plastic with a metal insert. The plastic insulates my hand from the set. And there we go. I'll go back over and peek these again, and then move on to the final ratio detector setup. Now that I've got the sound IF peaked, the last stage is to set the ratio detector response curve. Now if you got a sweep generator, you can strive to get this nice S curve. If you don't, just have a VTVM and RF generator, what you can do is set up your VTVM, if you've got the type that has a 0 offset adjust that allows you to swing it over this much, you set it so that it's dead center. That's why they put the 0 mark down here. Then attach the connections where the service info says. Then you adjust the ratio detector such that when you rock it back and forth, it goes to either side of that 0 mark. You want it dead set on 0. What that means is as the frequency modulates up and down, it will translate it to a signal that varies in amplitude, centered around 21.25 megahertz. Alright, so that should be it. That should make a big difference in the sound. I disconnected all my test leads and hooked the signal source back up, so let's see if it helped out any. Oh yes, I hear sound.
Do not use if you are allergic to Eucrisa or its ingredients.
Excellent.
Allergic reactions may occur at an application site. The most common side effect is application site pain. Ask your doctor about Eucrisa.
When it comes to finding style and comfort at a great value,
Cool.
You don't have to go far.
That sounds a little weird, but this isn't the right speaker. I didn't want to damage the original, so I hooked up a little test speaker. It's got some tears in it, so I might come for some of that.
Value City Furniture. For a limited time only, get savings better than a tax break with
But hey,
10% off store-wide.
we have sound.
Purchase required. Plus,
Pay no interest till January 2019.
So check us out. You're gonna love what you see. Only at Value City Furniture.
This is my everyday. Up early, rush to get ready, wake her up for school.
Alright, so now we have sound.
Here, get home in time for dinner, and her
Oh, I guess we move on to video now. Picture's pretty good, but not quite as sharp or bright as I'd like. Now, part of that might very well be the picture tube, but also I noticed the focus is blurry throughout the entire range of this. If I go all the way counterclockwise, it gets better, but it's really get better than that. Plus, I would like the sweet spot for the focus to be more towards the middle and all the way one extreme. I finished replacing the last of the paper caps. There were a couple on the vertical integrator and a couple in the vertical amp and sync separator circuit, and also on the video amp I found a resistor that had doubled in value, approximately from 4.7K to about 9K. So let's see what difference all that makes. I've noticed the sound cuts out now and then, so I gotta go through. One thing I want to do is spray some deoxit into all the tube sockets and make sure that they are cleaned out, and also this coax cable from the upper to lower chassis is kind of weak. See the sound cut out again. Now it's back.
Okay, Dad. Nice to meet you, Martha. Thank you, Ollie.
But when it is working, the sound is nice and loud.
Me too.
The picture's looking pretty darn good now. I think replacing that resistor definitely helped. Focus seems to have improved too. I'll also replaced a couple more electrolytics. So this can has been completely replaced now, as has that. But we still have this guy, and there's one.
Did you notice a big change in... Oh, yes.
It's not completely recapped yet.
Well, the older boy has to wear those blue jeans. Features. Nothing to be done about that now. But I must. Little Theodore was so...
I'm really happy with the progress, though.
Well, I've tried to get those particular trousers away from him several times, but he keeps getting the back...
The tuner needs some more cleaning, too.
June, while you're gone... Well, if you think I'm interfering... Oh,